I guess what surprised me most coming here, of course, some things are familiar, but in Kazakhstan in particular, I think what surprised me more than anything else was just the sheer scale, the landscape. All of these, whether they're cultural competitions, sporting competitions, or it could be a music festival, it could be, the Astana International Forum is a kind of political and economic and business forum. All of these different events, I think, are important for putting Kazakhstan on the map.
Katie, you've traveled quite a bit in Kazakhstan. What's next? I know you send me some pictures, and you've been to places I've never set foot.
Really?
Yes.
Ah.
But what's next?
What's next?
Any winter adventures or something?
And I have to say, all the guides that I've booked like that I've just found on the internet, have been terrific. Really great people. One of my predecessors, Paul Brummell, who was ambassador in Kazakhstan about 20 years ago, and he wrote the first Bradt guide to Kazakhstan.
Wow.
First thing to really kind of cement in people's minds that Kazakhstan has this extraordinary natural heritage, and then you can layer.
I particularly love the campaign. Great, from 2011 to 2014 probably.
Yeah, actually we're still going with Great.
Still going.
Yes, we are. Yes, but sometimes you do just need reminding that there's somewhere really beautiful and interesting close to home. That was a stroke of genius, I thought.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us today at the travel podcast, which we bluntly tweaked and then are calling it Boldcast, because it's a candid talk about tourism opportunities in Kazakhstan, about probably your opinion. I know it's probably a little bit challenging to an official in the status of ambassador to speak openly about something, but for this purpose, we put you in an informal setting, and once again, bluntly, I would suggest that I call you by your first name, if you don't mind.
Please,
Kathy.
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Once again, welcome to the Boldcast, and by the way, congratulations on the opening of the Visa Center here in Astana, Almaty, I believe Atrao as well.
That's right.
So
yes.
I think it's a huge achievement in order to boost travel both ways, and especially that in the past, I remember the documents had to be shipped to Istanbul for the processing, etc. But now I think locals can apply here, I believe.
So yes, I mean, actually the documentation processing still happens elsewhere, but the service, I think, will be better. So that's certainly our aim, because we very much want people to have as smooth a journey to the UK and as trouble-free a visa application process as possible.
That's very important. I know. I still remember my first visit to London and the application process. I had to go to Almaty to apply and do the fingerprints and then so on. But it was worth it.
Yes.
So just to throw in, and it's an informal discussion. Once again, you can ask me questions. It's a free flow, but just to stir the discussions. My traditional question: what was your expectation when you were first appointed? You could have been here before. I know you know the region. You've been to Moscow. You were the ambassador of Her Majesty in Armenia for quite a while. But were there any expectations, and was there any conflict of expectation? Was it something different that you were expecting?
So yes, I hadn't actually been to, although you're right, I'd worked in the region, I'd worked in Moscow. I'd previously studied in Russia, in Petersburg and in Yaroslavl. I'd been an ambassador in Armenia. I'd travelled to a number of different countries in the Caucasus and in the Baltics, but I hadn't been to Central Asia before getting this job.
Okay.
So I guess, but I'd read a lot. My husband had travelled a lot in Central Asia, so I guess I had a number of impressions. I'd seen photographs of Samarkand.
Right.
But I guess what surprised me most coming here, of course, some things are familiar, but in Kazakhstan in particular, I think what surprised me more than anything else was just the sheer scale, the landscape. And particularly, I think, for somebody coming from the UK, which is a fairly small island with 65 million or so people, and I live in the southeast of England, which is very densely populated, not far from London, to come to Kazakhstan, to be in Astana in the middle of the steppe, and to fly 2 hours in that direction, 2 hours in that,
Right.
Just the sheer size of Kazakhstan still amazes me.
Right. I was recently speaking at a very short I wouldn't call it podcast, but it was a sort of interview. And first thing that I shared with the audience was mind the distance, mind the territory of Kazakhstan, flying 2 hours, one direction, and then probably taking a train or even a bus. And then if you go to transborder Uzbekistan and so on, so you have to plan well. And it's not a one-time visit destination, and given the size of the region. And it's interesting that you mentioned Samarkand and of course, Uzbekistan is a good neighbor of ours.
Yes,
we compete sometimes, but I think we complement each other in terms of the tourism product.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
it is interesting that foreigners' perception of Central Asia derives from the images of Uzbekistan, and I think that goes back to Soviet times, when Uzbekistan was more touted as tourism destinations than Kazakhstan, and we know why. But it's interesting that, and it's actually helping Uzbekistan nowadays because they rely on this huge experience and expertise, and some of the systems were set up long ago.
Yes. But I think Kazakhstan benefits too from that overall amazing branding of the Silk Road. Actually, I think that for all of the countries of Central Asia, including Kazakhstan, I think the Silk Road for an English speaker, that word just evokes something wonderful. Camels and merchants and beautiful fabrics and spices, and so it has incredibly positive connotations. And I think this is one of the kind of things that Kazakhstan, as well as the other countries in Central Asia, can really benefit from.
Right, but where would normally British learn about the Silk Road or the region? I know you brought the book by Nick Fielding. And he wrote this amazing story of Thomas and Lucy Atkinson's journey from 19th century, and there were a few other books covering the biography of this early days travelers and discoverers of the region. But other than that, and what would be the motivation for people, or the inspiration for British people to learn about this region?
So I think there are a number of things. I think the British for centuries have been adventurers, and they like to see something new, to discover something new. And I would say, in the last 30, 40 years, as air travel has made it much more possible for people on a limited budget to be adventurous, not just the rich and the aristocrats. I think now what you have is this tremendous desire, particularly amongst the kind of the young, the backpacking generation, I would call them, the sort of 25 to 35-year-olds before kids who want to go and see something that no one else has seen. 30 years ago, I went backpacking around Thailand, for example, it wasn't really undiscovered. It was a pretty well-beaten tourist trail 30 years ago. But I still felt quite adventurous with my rucksack and staying in some truly cheap hotels, and I think young people today are again looking for that kind of adventure. But then there are other segments as well. There's the ecotourist who's looking for amazing nature, and of course this is where Kazakhstan has something really extraordinary to offer. And then you get the kind of the culture tourists, the culture history tourists who are interested in these amazing stories. The extraordinary tales of the Silk Road, the development of Islam in this part of the world, and they're interested in archaeology. And so I think you have these different segments who are looking for something new to discover.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned backpackers, because in 2020 we were named as the preferred and must-visit destination by the Society of British Association of Backpackers.
Yes.
So we couldn't track if that was actually the reason for the slight spike of interest and visitation from your market, but that definitely we want to have such accolades, be it for low budget kind of traveler or high end traveler. And this year for the World Nomad Games, I know 5 or 6 kind of premier top level adventure travel agencies offered the package for the World Nomad Games. And I remember, unfortunately, you couldn't stay here during the games, but do you think such games would be a magnet for travelers from UK?
Absolutely. I think it was a fantastic marketing opportunity, which you really capitalised on. I thought the branding, the advertising campaigns were really brilliantly done.
Thank you.
And I think these sorts of events really help make it a destination to go to. They help people kind of make a decision. So, I mean, just another example, it was the Ironman competition, actually, a different kind of competition, but
still adventurous.
But still adventurous. And again, it's a sporting competition now taking place once a year in Kazakhstan, which puts Kazakhstan on the map and gets people thinking about it. And so all of these whether they're cultural competitions, sporting competitions, or it could be a music festival, it could be, the Astana International Forum is a kind of political and economic and business forum. All of these different events, I think, are important for putting Kazakhstan on the map.
Right. I remember in 2002, while still a student at my university, I had a permanent job at a hotel, but I would now and then take side hustles, and I was sometimes volunteering, sometimes working as a tour guide. And one of the groups I was accompanying was a group of British birdwatchers.
Yes.
2002, you wouldn't expect this kind of cohort of people coming, staying in really low-budget hotels and traveling around here on bumpy roads, going really into the bush.
They're very serious, the birdwatchers.
Very serious with these huge cameras. And they could spot a tiny bird from 100 meters distance, and I was really amazed that we were attracting this kind of traveler. And I think that speaks to your point about our destination being really adventurous. And I think the tourism, ecotourism, adventure, and bird watching really fits that picture.
No, it really does. And I think actually the ecotourism market is a really important one for Kazakhstan. And I'll mention a couple of things. One is from the birds' point of view, Kazakhstan is on the Central Asian Flyway, which is one of the really key migratory bird routes. And there are all sorts of critically endangered or rare species. I'm going to forget their names, but it's things like the white-bellied heron and the sociable lapwing.
Plover.
Yes, exactly. And as well as, of course, the steppe eagle. Yes. All of these amazing rare or critically endangered birds, which breed in Kazakhstan or in Siberia, and then travel through Kazakhstan down towards India or to the Middle East or to Africa. So for the birdwatching community, and they're a serious community, that this is a really important thing. And of course, in the UK, we have a really serious birdwatching organisation, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the RSPB, who have worked in Kazakhstan, have been supporting the development of Kazakh biodiversity organisations for the last 20 years. And so I think this partnership actually has now led to another really important development in ecotourism, which is the restoration of the Saiga antelope, which again is a unique indigenous species to Kazakhstan and this region, to the Eurasian steppe, and which was critically endangered 15 years ago. And the Kazakh organisation, the Association for the Conservation of Biodiversity of Kazakhstan, supported by RSPB, Flora and Fauna, and I think a German NGO as well, working together with the Ministry of Ecology, has put together this fantastic initiative, the Altyn Conservation Initiative. Altyn, of course, meaning Golden Steppe.
Golden Steppe.
Golden Steppe. And they, working together, have saved the Saiga antelope. And now I think there are around 4 million from 2015 years ago.
It's growing exponentially, yeah. Luckily, yeah.
Yes, and the final part of this story, 2 years ago, the UN recognised this extraordinary achievement and made it a flagship biodiversity conservation project, one of 10, I think, flagship UN projects. And in November, just a month ago, in South Africa, our own Prince William, the Prince of Wales, he has his own conservation prize or climate change prize, which is called the Earthshot Prize. It's like the moonshot.
Right.
The moonshot was, how do we get a man on the moon in 10 years? And the Earthshot is how do we find the technologies and the systems to save the Earth?
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly.
And the Altyn Initiative won the prize in the Protect and Restore Nature category, which is a £1 million prize, lots of support and exciting collaborations ahead. So it's really, I think, putting Kazakhstan on the map again.
It's amazing, and thank you so much for your support. It's really great news, and congratulations to our colleagues at ACBK.
Yes.
It's great initiative, yes.
But what's so great about it is that it is a real example of a collaboration between an NGO, the Ministry of Ecology, and foreign NGOs in the conservation world. So that group together has done a brilliant job.
Right, amazing, yes. Kudos to all those teams that participated, and thank you once again, Kathy, for supporting this. Well, it's an amazing initiative.
A pleasure, and I think again from an ecotourism point of view, it means that now the steppe is starting to be restored to the way it was before.
Right.
Full of animals and full of grazing animals, contributing to the biodiversity of the steppe. And of course, that's just the start. The next thing is the kulan. This is the kind of wild donkeys, which are in various places on the steppe, but used to be in much larger numbers. And of course, the Przhalski horses as well, which have just come from the zoo, I think, in Prague, and have been introduced to the steppe.
Exactly. So, and then you've recently been to Altyn Emel National Park.
Right.
You probably spotted some of the kulans or
I'm not sure if I saw a kulan, but I think, is it the goitered gazelle? It's another, I think, very special.
That's another species. Yes, quite. Well, not endemic probably, but very popular in that part of the region of Kazakhstan. Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing. And we work normally with ACBK on birding, tourism, and we rely on them when it comes to finding a proper guide who could actually lead excursions.
Yes,
and if you remember, we've been to Korgalzhyn together to spot flamingo. That's quite a popular tour but not for professionals, of course. And as you mentioned, the birds migrating through Kazakhstan and many migration corridors lie through Kazakhstan. So I guess even the birds found the middle corridor,
They found the middle corridor, exactly.
To shorten their distances. Yes, amazing. But speaking of the logistics, and I know it's one of the ways to promote the country, what do you think of the potential of Kazakhstan to move the goods and trucks through its territory? Will that somehow affect and help the image of travel? Will that eventually bring attention of other nations, China, European nations, while they're doing business now through Kazakhstan via middle corridor? Will that eventually lead to more flocks of tourists?
Well, I hope so, because it kind of opens up other types of opportunity. For example, I mean, for many years, the Trans-Siberian Railway had a grip on people's imaginations. Just this idea of such a long 6-day or 7-day train journey from one end of Russia to the other. And so I think, again, for a British person, the idea of a long train journey has a kind of romance about it.
Right.
And now if you can travel from Turkey to Baku, and then across the Caspian, and then across Kazakhstan, and then into China. I mean, that sounds like a pretty exciting journey to do.
Yes, Jules Verne put it in his book, and I know it was a fiction about the Trans-Caspian train when they crossed from. They took a train from Tbilisi to Baku, and from Baku they crossed on a ferry. And I know even if at that time, even it was a fiction, people were really interested in this kind of route. They contemplated this somehow. I think this can be put on the map in the travel catalogs, and I'm pretty sure this will work. And you mentioned the important road, romanticizing something. And I think the romance is something that is inherent to Central Asia, to the Silk Road. And by the way, I guess we're experiencing the renaissance of the Silk Road. And I think we need to add a pinch of romance to all these travels and train and ferry and all these means of transportation, not only airborne. Yeah.
And I have to say, I love traveling by train and the kind of that old-fashioned coupe where you have the four bunks. I know they don't suit everybody, but I love them, and because they're so sociable, and you can crowd lots of people in. You can get out your picnic. You can have some tea and or go to the restaurant car.
Right.
They're a wonderful way to travel, actually.
And breaking bread while on the way, I think that really adds this romance
special
on the way when you take something out and you offer to your fellow travelers.
Exactly. Yes, you make the best friends.
Exactly. Well, by the way, what's your favorite Kazakh dish, if there is one?
Oh, goodness. Well, in some ways, I think there are similarities between the kind of Kazakh approach to food and the British approach, in the sense that we like hearty meals, which are good food, good meat, cooked like roast. For us, it's roast beef. For the Kazakh people, it's often roast horse or boiled horse and or beef or lamb. Lots of beef as well. So I guess, and we also really like stews. So for me, I think probably the dish that I enjoyed the most is kurdak.
Kurdak, that's my favorite too.
Is it your favorite too?
Yes, I love it.
Because it's rich. It's usually
juicy also.
Yes, it's got sort of different parts of the animal, a very rich sauce, maybe some vegetables. That's my favorite.
Right. Some people, foreigners, find Kazakh food a little blunt, but I think kurdak is truly an exception. Yes. Because you can experiment with spices there a lot. Adding a little bit of pepper, extra pepper, and so on. Yeah.
No, exactly. And I think particularly in the winter, it's the perfect food.
Exactly. Excellent. Well, and anything else on top of kurdak?
Oh, well, I mean, I like
we share
everything.
There's a tradition of afternoon tea. I know this. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was very, very pleased to discover that there is a tradition in Kazakhstan to drink tea with milk, because we often feel in the UK that we're alone in the world drinking tea with milk. So to discover that this was also a Kazakh tradition, I felt very at home. And again, it's better because you can have really good strong tea if you put milk in it. So yes, no, I would, and I think the various things. I know your previous podcast guest Marco talked about his love of Balsac.
Yes,
I'm with him there. I mean, for us, the Balsac is very like, of course, a donut, but without the sugar.
Right.
But dipping the Balsac in kaymak. In sour cream.
That's the best.
Absolutely fantastic.
Amazing. Yes. Speaking of the tea, does milk go first or tea go first?
I would say milk first.
Milk first.
Yes.
That's the way we do it. Yes, okay. And very thick tea. Yes.
Very
nicely brewed. Yeah.
Exactly, properly brewed. Yes.
Perfect. Well, so many similarities, and I think one of the ways and one of the reasons people actually travel, they don't want to see just the differences. What's different in cultures? They're happy to find similarities. So I think there are quite a few similarities that should help us.
Yes, actually, yes. And I've said before, I mean, I think one of the things that perhaps surprised me when I came to Kazakhstan was I felt kind of on a human level, I feel some similarities. As strange as that may sound, we're from a small island in the Atlantic, and Kazakhstan is an enormous continent-sized country on the other side of Eurasia. But I think there's a kind of a politeness, a kindness, and maybe a slight reserve when you first meet people that I've noticed, and that I think is, there's a similarity.
That's right. Yes, I've noticed it a lot in our people. We don't want to be too officious at the first meeting, and staying a little reserved, as you say.
Yes.
And a lot of people, and I think that speaks about the descent that we had. A lot of people from the aristocratic and descent, and sultans, and all of those whom actually Atkinson's described in their travelogue. Yes. And I think that also kind of underpins the kind of aristocracy. Maybe.
Yes.
And,
well, I think also that culture of hospitality and generosity, which I think was such a necessary feature of nomadic life, that you welcome the guest as a kind of gift from God.
Exactly.
And you invite them in, and you treat them well. I think, again, coming from the UK, where we've become a lot more kind of, I guess we have a different attitude. Maybe it's sort of an attitude born of too many centuries of urban living. We're a bit more, I don't want to say less welcoming to guests, but I don't think that culture of kind of automatic hospitality is quite the same. Right. And actually, if you'll allow me, I just wanted to read. There was just something from this book that I noticed.
Please,
And this was an observation of Nelson Fell, who came here in 1903 to run the Uspensky mine in now near Zhezkazgan in Ulutau, and he wrote very extensive diaries. He published a book actually about his experiences. He did watercolors. He obviously absolutely fell in love with the steppe and the people that he met. And there was one line from one of his letters, I think, that struck me, that I thought I'd read, which says, "Never have I met a more kindly, gentle, hospitable race of people. And I found that this was the estimate in which they were generally held by the English mining people I met on my travels." And this was back in 1903,
Beautiful.
1906. And I think I would say that's such a brilliant description of my experience, certainly.
That's a great
in
representation
Kazakhstan.
of hospitality at that time. And that actually leads me to another point I wanted to discuss and bring up to your attention. One of the early miners, I guess, or investors who came here somehow ended up moving between Zhezkazgan and Balkhash, which still belongs to kind of the same administrative region. And somewhere near Balkhash, that investor purchased from locals a pair of local authentic boots called Messe. Messe, and that Messe ended up in British Museum.
I haven't heard this story. How interesting.
So there was an exposition in 2016 about the Islamic art, and then those boots, along with different types of Turkish slippers and different type of other footwear, were at the exposition in British Museum. And a local artist found this out and got inspired. So what he actually produced, and he is a sculptor himself. So they produced a 3-meter specimen. I mean the full resemblance of those Messe, the boots. And that installation was kept for years in his backyard. And then, as part of the creative industries, we've organized a creative pitch whereby artists could approach corporations and pitch something. So he came up and pitched this to BI Group, and BI Group now purchased this installation, and it's now erected as part of their architectural ensemble in one of the residential blocks.
What a brilliant idea.
It's a 3-meter installation with mosaic and those boots normally worn inside of the house, indoors, and that's why they're brilliantly, richly embroidered. Made of felt, of course, but very colorful. Yes. And it's near the block called Jetsu by BI Group. Beautiful, beautiful installation. Yes, and we try to create a story again. add a little romance to this.
Yes.
And you know the story of Arjol in Kazakh culture. Yeah. So those boots are resting on Arjol, piece of
on the white,
fabric.
the white sort of path. Yes.
Right. And if you're setting on a journey, or if I don't know, you're getting married or something, stop by, touch and rub those shoes, and in order to get a good luck. Yeah.
No, I think that's wonderful, and I think again, one of the things that's really interesting for tourists is to see. Obviously, part of what they want to see is authenticity, and you can go to archaeological sites and you can sort of see the ruins of buildings as they used to be, but it's also really interesting to see kind of recreations, I think, of recreations of what villages might have been like, or to see also the way of life or the kind of crafts, arts and crafts, sort of reimagined in a modern way. So both, I think, are kind of really interesting. And I was going to say, I brought with me. Can I show you today?
Please. Absolutely.
I know one of the things that people have been doing is reimagining the kind of the traditional chapan. So the traditional outfit that would have been worn, and this is one example of that was given to me recently, actually, of a sort of a modern imagining of a chapan.
Right.
And I think it's a wonderful gift that tourists would love to buy, and I'm just enormously impressed by it. So many different examples and patterns.
Right. Yes,
really,
I like it.
A wonderful thing.
Truly amazing piece. And yes, you're right. People want to have this feeling after they visit the country. They want to continue being attached to the destination they liked. And I think through the garments that they wear on a daily basis, I think you leave this kind of long-lasting memory of the destinations.
Exactly. No,
Beautiful.
something that you can keep with you forever, and as a memory of a precious journey.
And we would love, speaking of garments and footwear, we would love to bring for the temporary exposition those masses from British Museum. In fact, we wrote to them, and maybe with your help, we can get in touch with them and see if we can organize the same kind of exposition here in Kazakhstan to showcase again the friendship and the history. And you know, well, starting with miners, and way before that, there was a very strong connection of British culture, British investors to this specific region. And
yes. Well, travellers, adventurers, as well as businessmen, and you mentioned Thomas and Lucy Atkinson, and really it's still not entirely clear why they decided in the late 1840s to travel around East Kazakhstan. Thomas Atkinson was an architect.
Right.
He travelled to Russia, I think, to make his fortune, but decided that he would that travelling around and doing watercolour sketches of East Kazakhstan would be some way to maybe become famous, make his name as a traveller, and found this extraordinary woman, Lucy, who was willing to travel with him for 6 years on horseback and in sledges, had a baby on the way.
Alatau.
Exactly, named her child Alatau after the mountain range. So they're the classic example, I would say, of slightly it's eccentric but also kind of extraordinary, so the eccentric but extraordinary English thirst for travel and adventure.
Right. Speaking of eccentric characters, I can't help but bring another famous actor, apparently from the UK, Sacha Baron Cohen, who
goodness,
who helped us promote the destination in such a great way. I remember 2006, I was crossing the border in the United States, handing my passport to the passport control guy, and the guy started smiling. I was like, why are you smiling? And he told me about the story because I had no idea about the first movie of Borat. And yes, we'd love to host Mr. Cohen here in Kazakhstan. We wrote to him before the piece in New York Times came up in 2020, when we kind of tried to counter the second sequel of the movie with very nice campaign. And I'm sure you've seen that.
That was a stroke of genius, I thought.
Thank you.
Because I mean, what was so great, I think, about that campaign was it was taking the most important thing from the Borat films, which was humor and irreverence. Yes, and showing that the people of Kazakhstan have a sense of humor, and I think that's a very endearing thing, a very endearing characteristic, and so I thought it was a really great.
We went a little
campaign.
further, and our quality mark program here in Kazakhstan, it stopped very nice. So. Just yesterday, we had this ceremony of awarding these plaques, and we have two categories. Nice, they're almost there, the hotels and the travel operators, the venues, but then we have very nice, which is a mark of excellence. So we keep the legacy of that one.
Yes. And I think to show that you have a sense of humor it's such an attractive characteristic. And I think, again, it sort of adds to Kazakhstan's brand as a place that's welcoming and fun and interesting and different.
Right. Katie, you've traveled quite a bit in Kazakhstan. What's next? I know you send me some pictures, and you've been to places I've never set foot in.
Really?
Yes.
Ah.
But what's next? Any winter adventures or something?
Yeah, so I guess I've managed to go to the places that were top of my list. So the last three were with you we went together to Bozhira in Mangostal,
exactly.
Which I have to say I still think that for me was just such a world-class landscape. It really was a kind of Star Wars or Dune type film set, really extraordinary. So I hope there are some film directors watching this podcast.
Hope so too, yeah.
And because really it's the most otherworldly, extraordinary landscape. These limestone cliffs left by a 5 million year old sea, really extraordinary. And then Altyn Emel, again, extraordinary cliffs. And quite recently, a mountain biker filmed a really amazing video.
Yes, that's right.
Of him going down these sheer cliffs, really highlighting just their incredible beauty and extraordinary structure. And then the third one was East Kazakhstan and Karagai. And I have to say, it absolutely lived up to my expectations. The most unspoilt landscape, the most beautiful mountains, wonderful rolling hills. So those were the three I really, really wanted to see. But I'm trying to go to all 20 oblasts, and I still have a few left to go. So Taraz, I haven't yet been to. And again, I think a really important historical city.
You will enjoy an open-air museum there, yes. The excavations, archaeological site, right in the city center.
Yes, so I'm really looking forward to Taraz. I still haven't been down to kind of like to Zhetysu and to Balkhash, that sort of.
That's where Atkinson's travel, actually.
Yes, exactly.
Kapal,
so I must go there, and then I haven't been to Zhezkazgan, right in the center of Kazakhstan, where the mining sector started, the copper mines, and also of course Ulatau has tremendous symbolic significance for the Kazakh people. It was the gathering place, I understand.
Definitely,
during
one of the most sacred.
One of the most sacred places, with I think petroglyphs and other important things as well. And then some of the northern cities, so Oral, Pavlodar, I haven't yet been to. And there's more in Mangostal, actually. I only saw one small part of the extraordinary landscape of Mangostal region on the shores of the Caspian. So I know there are still amazing mosques which were carved into the rock, which I haven't yet managed to see.
Right. Well, this is something we should organize maybe.
Yes, please.
for the diplomatic corps and do this again. Yes, I remember that trip with probably 20 plus ambassadors trip and with their families, and we had 40 plus jeeps, and there was a huge caravan.
It was a caravan, in fact. Yes.
But of course, being ambassador and followed by Kazakh tourism, and everything was organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That trip must have been a little bit different in terms of logistics. You were probably surfed slightly better than the usual tourists, to be honest. But would you think this kind of destination is quite remote from a city center, from the administrative center, Bozhira, 200 plus
Yes, it was 3 or 4 hours drive.
3 or 4 hours drive
yes.
with a short stop, fuel stop on the way. Would that attract regular tourists coming and exploring fairly new destinations to them and going off the beaten track right away? Do you think
I
this
think
is something?
so. I mean, again, we were talking at the beginning about that segment of adventure tourists, and I think for that group of tourists, absolutely, a long car journey wouldn't freak them out at all. Because again, if the view at the end of it is worth it, and it absolutely is, then they would do it. And actually, I know a colleague of mine in the embassy who's the kind of, if you ever need a kind of informal consultant on how to attract sort of a 30-year-old English adventure traveller, then she's your person, because she went camping, I think, for 2 or 3 days with a guide in Mangostau in order to see as many of the sites as possible. And she's exactly the kind of person who's not afraid of camping, of having it a bit rough, and doing something kind of in a way that enables you to really appreciate the landscape and the beauty.
Yes.
And I've actually, I quite often like to travel incognito, and I kind of book guides, and I don't tell them who I am. And I did it actually just recently in Shymkent in Turkestan, where we went to see Otrar, the famous city that Genghis Khan destroyed on his way across Kazakhstan, and Sauran, which until the 18th century was a big flourishing city, and now just has the sort of the remains of the mud brick walls. Really extraordinary place. But yes, I sort of just booked a guide, didn't tell them who I was, and to sort of, I guess, also see what it's like to travel around and experience it. And I have to say, all the guides that I've booked like that I've just found on the internet have been terrific. Really great people.
One of the reasons I started this podcast because I spoke with many of your colleagues, and many of them travel incognito, as you said. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. They want to experience it firsthand.
Yes, exactly.
They want to see the authenticity, the real life settings, how Kazakh people live.
Yes.
And something clicked to me, like if foreigners, in a pretty high status that probably shouldn't be going anywhere else without security, but they travel freely. They rent cars. They go across the border. Marco went on a bicycle
to Bishkek. I know. Amazing.
Yes. And
yes.
If these people can do this, why would locals complain so much about the lack of infrastructure and so on and so on? Of course, I was trying to give myself a little bit of leeway, kind of in our constant pressure of being pressurized for the lack of infrastructure and so on and so on. But again, frankly speaking, or in your most candid way, would you say that it's really possible to travel in Kazakhstan, given the lack of, the stops along the way, the roadside service, and the lack of guides, or probably an issue with foreign languages?
So I think it's definitely possible, and there definitely are English language guides. You can Google, you can find, there are a number of different websites that can put you in touch with local guides who speak English. So it's definitely possible. But I guess it will come at a kind of higher price. So I think if you want to travel independently and you don't have Russian or Kazakh, then I think that is much more challenging. Yes, and actually, a colleague was telling me that like some of the nature reserves are very well organised here. They're very careful. You have to register as you go in. Often you have to take a kind of a guide with you from one of the proper rangers who will give you the proper guided tour. But to set that up, you either need a tourist agency to do it for you, or you need to have the Russian or Kazakh to ring up and book it. And so access to that kind of experience at the moment is limited to people who speak the local language. And on kind of facilities more generally, I mean, I do think it will always be a good idea to have more rest stops. And I think a British company back in April signed an MOU with the Ministry of Transport to look at establishing more rest stops powered by solar panels and with proper toilets, somewhere to buy a glass of water.
And internet probably.
Yeah, maybe sort of Wi-Fi, because again, that Wi-Fi connection is sort of patchy, and if you do break down, then that could be a concern depending on the time of year or where you're travelling. So I think some more infrastructure like that is definitely important. And the other bit of infrastructure I think I'd mention is really important is Kazakhstan has world-class hiking and horse trekking. But what it doesn't yet have, which we have in the UK and you have in Europe and places like Switzerland, is this system of mountain huts. And also a system of kind of mountain rescue, which is usually staffed. I mean, there are sort of the professional mountain rescue service people, but there are also a lot of volunteers who make up a kind of, if you like, a community of alpinists or kind of hikers who themselves are, they have an interest in maintaining the paths and making sure there is a kind of mountain hut in a place that's important.
It's more or less set up in Almaty.
Yes,
there's a huge community.
Almaty is really kind of developing precisely that kind of ecosystem of local people who care about the mountains and who want to go up into the mountains and so therefore are invested in making sure the infrastructure is there. So it's that's the kind of and again it's sort of it's a mixture of a kind of private service, but also you need that kind of voluntary community that is doing it itself at the weekend.
Definitely.
So the local people that will go and sort of check that the trail hasn't been washed away by the spring floods, and will then sort of gather a bunch of volunteers to go and do a bit of maintenance or rubbish collection. Those sorts of systems. I mean, in the UK, in our great national parks like the Lake District or the Cairngorms or the Peak District, there's a whole network of volunteers who marshal, people that want to help support the local ecosystem.
Great point. Yes, and it's quite well set up in Almaty alone, but outside of Almaty, where we have 14 national parks, including Ulutau and the whole of South Kazakhstan and East Kazakhstan, where you've been to Katun, Karagay. But again, you need lots of nature lovers, mountain lovers, caring community, and probably a few apps and proper internet connection to run this. But this huts up on the rescue huts, emergency huts, they're very important. I know Akimat of Almaty set up a dozen of them in the mountains, painting them in orange so they could be seen from outside with some blankets and some food inside. But of course, we have to make this accessible across the board everywhere in Kazakhstan, because we're surrounded by mountains.
Yes, exactly. In those exposed places, in those places that are far away, where if you do break down or you get sort of unexpectedly caught by bad weather, on a mountain, then you've got a way to get into a comfortable place. So and I think that would as you say, in Almaty it's really developing, and that will make a big difference.
And one of the as a component of safety, we were looking into the small beeper, like a tracker that you would take up in the mountains, which could track you easily using the suborbital satellites, and you don't need even internet connection. But as you might have heard, a lot of people every once in a while they get into trouble. They are not wearing proper garments. They go up there, caught up by bad weather, and then casualties happen. So we were looking into this one as well to help mountaineers.
Yes, no, that's a great idea, because even, of course, part of it is sort of, again, educating young people about how you should always be prepared in a mountain. That kind of education is important, but even the best prepared mountaineer, they can trip and accidentally, break an ankle. You never know what will happen. So those sorts of systems are important.
Right. Education is important. And one of the initiatives we started with national parks is putting up so-called visitor centers which is the kind of first touch base for newbies who are coming to the mountains, and they get inside. Of course, they find a small cafeteria and a washroom, but then they're also educated about the safety, because one of the gorges is called Ayu, which is a bear. Of course, you can encounter wildlife, so you have to know about this.
Yes.
So we need this network, and I think we're following the European and the North American example in this sense, whereby visitor centers are easily accessible, but they are blended in nature.
Yes.
They don't disturb the nature, but that's an important first stop or emergency stop in case you need it.
Yes. And I have to say, when I went to Altyn National Park in September, I was really impressed that the infrastructure that was there had obviously been carefully designed to blend in. No, I was really, really struck by how well it had been done. So I think I really see the development and the change, and I think it's great to see.
Thank you. Speaking of education, I know British Council has been instrumental in helping raise the bar in terms of English abilities of local population. By recent rating, I've read it somewhere. Somehow Kazakhstan ended up beyond top 100 in the English level proficiency here in Kazakhstan. Kyrgyzstan is slightly above, and a few other countries in the region. Would British Council, and also probably Achieving program, which is really amazing, would there be a chance that we could discuss something about tourism education? Unfortunately, Achieving is not offering anything on tourism, but I can understand why. The concentration is on sustainability and so on. But tourism, by adding 8% to global carbon footprint, needs more attention. And we think we should take tourism now through the prism of sustainability, because people keep traveling. 1.4 billion travelers, international arrivals were registered last year globally. And it keeps growing.
Keeps growing. Yes. Well, actually, there's nothing to stop somebody applying for Achieving Scholarship in tourism. That we have no requirement on subject. Actually, the only requirement we have for Achieving Scholar is that they have to have worked after graduation or done something after graduation for at least 2 years, so that they've experienced the real world and their decision about a master's program has been kind of considered. And the other thing we're looking for in the application and in the interview is what I call light in someone's eyes, that they want to change something, and they think if they go to the UK and they do a master's program, this will help them become a leader in their field, become a change maker in their field. And that field could be tourism, or it could be ecology, or it could be energy engineering. It could be anything. It could be politics. But what we're looking for are people that want to make a difference. So, and I absolutely agree with you that one of the challenges in tourism is how to make it more sustainable, and I think again there are different types of low impact tourism.
Right.
I mean, again, this is where actually we've taken something important from Kazakhstan. This whole concept of glamping, glamorous camping, which has been sweeping across the UK. It involves yurts actually. So we now have yurts all across the UK offering people this glamorous camping.
Amazing.
And this opportunity to be in a beautiful place in a more low impact way than building a big hotel. And so I think the yurt is the kind of the brilliant example of sustainable low impact tourism. Actually,
nomads were very sustainable back in the day. Yes, nothing went to waste.
Yes,
everything was used. Yes,
yes.
We should have probably updated all the travel guides, ultimate travel guides. I know you have one here on the table with us today.
Yes.
And add more your travel,
Yes, no, exactly. And I thank you for mentioning it, because I just want to, because this is one of my predecessors, Paul Brummell, who was ambassador in Kazakhstan about 20 years ago.
Right.
And he wrote the first Bradt guide to Kazakhstan.
Wow.
So he literally wrote the book
Amazing.
about travel and tourism in Kazakhstan. And I think this is now the second edition. I think a third edition may be on the way. But it's I'm really proud. Paul is still an ambassador now in Latvia, and he's written a guidebook to Latvia as well. So he loves to write books, and this is a fantastic introduction to Kazakhstan if people are looking for a guidebook.
Perfect. And we've worked with a number of guidebooks in the past, and at some point we, not probably completely positive, but we felt that people were kind of driving away from print version. But then again, pandemic hit, and we understood that all-time classic is still there. People love touching paper, well, not necessarily going to newspapers, but buying and actually reading and making notes is still very important.
Yes.
So definitely we're going to use and Bradt and Lonely Planet and a few other guidebooks about Kazakhstan. Yeah. So thank you for reminding this, and thanks for sharing about this beautiful, fabulous job of your predecessor. I really didn't know about this. Yeah,
really?
Amazing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No. I'm super proud that it was a former British ambassador that wrote this guidebook.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes. And I think I mentioned that I thought archaeology is a really important kind of another angle. And Paul, when he was ambassador, the embassy was still in Almaty before everybody had moved up to Astana, and he made good friends with a British archaeologist who was doing her PhD from Cambridge in Almaty, and it's thanks to her that a couple of years ago we had an amazing exhibition in the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, Gold of the Great Steppe, looking at some of the recent finds from burial mounds in East Kazakhstan. And,
Golden Man.
Not the Golden Man, but new finds that have been made in recent years from East Kazakhstan. The Golden Man, of course, is the most famous find from the 1960s. But I remember her telling me that essentially the whole of Kazakhstan was like a kind of Iron Age archaeological site. That everywhere you looked, if you dug a little bit, you could find something extraordinary, and it's still, so much of it is still unexplored. So I think one of the things I'd really love to see, if you're asking for my candid opinion, is again more museums or more visitor centres which have really good displays and explanations about the archaeology. I mean, a lot of the little museums that I've been to in the cities, I was in one recently in Kostanay and in Kizilorda and in Shymkent. They have some of these artefacts from the 6th century BC, really amazing ceramics and or reconstructions of people's faces, or again some of the beautiful jewellery that was made by the metal workers of the time. And this is another kind of extraordinary legacy of this country.
Right. I think we should expand the access for tourists and going from traditional, kind of conventional attractions and moving somewhere else, less probably expected places. I know you've recently been to the archive of rare books and manuscripts, and or let's speak of even government buildings. I know in some countries you can go and witness a parliament session or something like this. So here in Kazakhstan, I think we're still a little bit restricted, and the museum's interpretation is very reserved, and we need probably a little bit more storytelling to kind of propel interest and so on.
Yes.
Would you say there are some other less conventional places that we should pay attention to that might grasp attention of potential travelers from Europe?
So, I mean, I think there are lots of places. I mean, I think I'm just thinking of a British example, actually. There's a great film on Netflix called The Dig, which is about the discovery of, I think it was an 8th century Anglo-Saxon burial site, where a 90-foot boat had been buried, and it was obviously a king, an Anglo-Saxon king or very important chief who'd been buried there, and it was the first time something something like that had been found, and it completely transformed our historians' understanding of what that earlier Anglo-Saxon kingdom was like, how sophisticated its culture was, evidence of jewels and stones which had obviously come from overseas. So it was an incredibly important historical site, and now it's a very popular destination for domestic tourists as well as foreign tourists, with a visitor centre and some of the amazing finds displayed. So I really think that's the kind of thing which Kazakhstan could do. And it's happening to a certain extent, but I think there's much more that could be done. The National Museum in Astana is terrific. I think that's a great museum. But again, in the regions, many of the museums are very much the kind of museums that were set up in the 1950s or 60s.
That's correct.
And in some cases they've been well looked after and developed. But I think there are lots of modern techniques which could be used to tell that story in a different way.
Right.
So I would love to see that, because again, that story from going back to the Bronze Age, but then certainly from the Iron Age and the sort of 7th, 6th century BC onwards, it's a really extraordinary story.
Well, we've touched the less traditional, but speaking of traditional and even probably fine arts, if you remember, we met once at the Astana Ballet, and do you think that Astana Ballet, Astana Opera, that there are many attractions of this kind? Speaking of fine arts, would this something that probably we should market as well to longer haul markets? I know people from the regions are coming to see the Nutcracker or other famous performances, but would that be something interesting for a long haul traveler, in your opinion?
So the first thing to say is that the operas and ballets and concerts that I've been to in Astana have been world class. So I think the productions are really extraordinary, brilliant, and so definitely could be a cultural sort of destination tourism venue. And I guess the question for me is how to turn that into a kind of a festival. I think how to put again Almaty or Astana or one of the other regional cities sort of on the global sort of calendar, if you like.
Right. So it has to be a series of performances.
I think so.
And events.
So, again, a colleague of mine who knows the Lake District well was talking about the Kendal Film Festival, which is it's part of that mountain culture where they have every year a film festival that then attracts the kind of mountaineering community from all around the world. Banff, I think, in Canada has a similar film festival. Almaty Almaty is a cultural city as well as a city set in a beautiful mountain range. So Almaty Almaty is growing a reputation as a creative hub, as a filmmaking place. I think a new art gallery is going to open, I think, in the next 6 months. So it feels to me, in fact, a few weeks ago I was down in Almaty at the Almaty Geek Games convention, which was the most extraordinary kind of gathering of people into kind of geek and comic
and we have Comic-Con
culture.
Festival here in Astana as well.
Exactly. So I think all of these kinds of cultural festivals, whether from the classical or the jazz or the kind of geek side of things, I think they again would really help to sort of raise Kazakhstan's profile, and Almaty in particular. I think has really been working on its kind of creative hub reputation. Again, the British Council has been working on that for some years and ran a kind of creative Almaty festival, I think, a conference for a number of years, which the Akimat has now taken over.
Right, they did it with Almaty University in the past. I remember attending one of those,
yes.
and a few initiatives to kind of sparkle the creativity.
Exactly, and I really think there's something there, and Almaty is such a, I don't know, it's when my children visited me here 2 years ago, and we spent some time in Almaty, and we did the classic kind of Charing Canyon, Kolsai Lake, Kaindi Lake tour, and we also just sort of hung out in Almaty for a few days. And they really liked the vibe. I love the street art in Almaty, for example. There are kind of some traditional statues, but there are also some really kind of original and sort of funky items of street art. Like there's a kind of a bit of street art outside the restaurant of Fischer, which you may know. It looks like a Chopin sort of, but without
and it's
a
just
man
hung
in
in
it.
the air.
Yes, exactly. There are some great examples like that, which add to that vibe. So yeah, I think and Almaty itself really lends itself, because it's such a leafy city. It lends itself to that kind of artistic street culture. So yeah, I think that's a really good sort of avenue to go down.
Excellent. And as Marco put it, you have to market it. Yes, and I know we're lacking this, and this is something. Well, first you have to come up with a series of really interesting events and festivals and so on. But then again, market it along with Ironman, along with World Nomad Games, and so on. This is something we have to learn from Visit Britain, the national tourism agency of the United Kingdom. They're doing a really wonderful job. I particularly love the campaign Great, from 2011 to 2014, probably.
Yeah, actually, we're still going with Great.
Still going.
Yes, we are.
Excellent,
Yes,
amazing.
It's gone through various kind of manifestations, and but we still talk
it's
about
such a creative way to
exactly
to
great
promote the
creativity,
country,
great history,
education,
yes,
and everything else.
great
yes.
science, yes. So no, I think it was a good campaign, and these, but I want to praise the adverts and the tourism campaigns which you've been doing, because I think what they've showcased first and foremost is the extraordinary landscapes of Kazakhstan, and I think that's still it's been so unknown globally that Kazakhstan has this extraordinary natural heritage, and so you take one look at those adverts and think, what an amazing place. So I think that's been sort of the first thing to really kind of cement in people's minds that Kazakhstan has this extraordinary natural heritage, and then you can layer things on top of that.
Thank you. That's music to my ear. Yes. Thank you for noting this and praising, of course. But going back to Visit Britain, and I did a little bit of my homework, and your first, well, probably not first, but the most recent tourism act was back in 1969, when Visit Britain was actually created,
really?
Set up. Before that,
I didn't know that.
Yes, yeah. Before that, the promotion since 1929 was run by National Association. Basically, I guess the companies came together and started promoting. But on a national level, you were doing it since 1969. That's actually longer than Kazakhstan exists as a sovereign state. Yes, so we have to learn a lot. And Kazakh tourism has been around for 7 years only. So we look at different, and it is our counterparts in different parts of the world. So this is something we should learn, especially in the positioning, in the country branding.
Yes, but you're making me think that that where we started, of course, was with domestic tourism. Because
That's right.
and until kind of cheap flights and mass market tourism really started in the kind of 1970s and 80s, when British tourists started flocking to Spain and other destinations like that. People had their holidays at home, or all my holidays as a child in the 1970s and 80s, we went camping in Wales. So I spent my childhood in a tent in Wales or in Scotland or in Devon, in different parts of the UK. And I think we had 1 or 2 holidays where we went camping in France. So just a couple of times my parents took me
beautiful, yeah.
overseas. But so I think, start with the domestic tourism offer. How do you offer something to your own population and make it attractive? And of course, again, there are places in the UK which used to be very popular seaside destinations, and then as tourists started finding they could go to Spain affordably, those seaside destinations have suffered and have declined. But some of them have very successfully reinvented themselves, often through art, actually. So in Hastings, in Margate, which were famous kind of Victorian seaside resorts, they have built new art galleries, and they have they have offered kind of like cheap accommodation and had festivals for artists, and pulling in the kind of cultural community has then made it interesting and has brought then tourists back to those towns.
Amazing,
because there's something else to offer them. There's the traditional British seaside experience, but also you can go to see some world-class art. So the Tate Gallery in St Ives in Cornwall, for example. So you go to this extraordinary modern art museum, and then you cross the road and you're on a beautiful sandy beach. So I think this is one of the ways that we have been reinventing our seaside towns that had suffered a lot. And I mentioned Wales. Again, Wales, I think, by developing this kind of mountaineering tourism, it's been helping to revive a place that was really hit very hard by deindustrialization. Our traditional coal mining towns and other industrial towns in Wales and in the north of England really suffered in the 60s and 70s and 80s as traditional industries closed down, and the tourism industry has helped to really revive those towns and given them a kind of a new way forward. So
that's very creative, actually. Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
And apart from tourism, we're learning from the Great Britain about creative industries, and I know we've worked a little bit on a few projects with you, and remember the photo exhibitions you attended right before the World Nomad Games. And
yes,
I think that's
they
really
were fantastic. Yes. No, and I think actually the British Council has just done another photo project, a photo competition for young wildlife photographers, together with our Natural History Museum. And I think that was being exhibited quite recently in Almaty. And so again, we hope we can use those photographs in future as a way of showcasing some of the beautiful nature in Kazakhstan. But I really hope that we can do more museum collaborations, actually. And your idea of trying to bring the boots from the British Museum to Kazakhstan, I think, is a great idea. I'm inspired by Marco's example of La Bella Principessa, bringing a Leonardo da Vinci to Kazakhstan. I mean, how can I top that? But
let's bring Messa. Yes,
but yes, I think we have an amazing resource in the British Museum, but also in our libraries. We have an amazing collection of early manuscripts from the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th century. Islamicization of this part of the world was happening. So some very important religious texts. One of the first Qurans, which has the translation in Chagatai, the early Turkic language that Kazakh has grown from. Again, some really extraordinary examples of manuscripts, which it would be great to bring and showcase here.
Thank you so much. But back to your previous point about starting with local domestic tourism, it's truly important. It's one of the points one of the cases I tried to make. And while foreigners bring, of course, foreign exchange, and it's very important that we use our local population as a mean of training.
Yes.
We have to travel. We have to invest in our own country. That way, when businesses, local SMEs, when they see this traffic, they can learn. They can be sure they can reinvest, because in some of the areas the season is so short, 2-3 months, and the businesses are truly suffering. The holiday houses, the hotels, and so on and so on. But some of the locals get offense when I say this because they feel that they're guinea pigs. But I think that's really important. I tell them you take it as an investment into your country, into the future, because you should be part of this tourism development that way by spending a little bit more and choosing out of your 2-3 vacations which you normally go abroad. Yes, choose one of them to stay here in Kazakhstan.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And actually another idea, this is an idea actually from the RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. 20 years ago, they started by supporting biodiversity clubs in universities because they really wanted to grow that kind of first generation of conservationists and young people that would love birds and would love animals and would want, maybe some of them would become professional conservationists. So they started investing in supporting some of these clubs, and this is how actually the Association for the Conservation of Biodiversity of Kazakhstan kind of helped to grow up. It was young people that were part of those clubs that went out onto the steppe with a pair of binoculars and fell in love with looking at nature, and so I guess I wonder whether the universities in Kazakhstan could be encouraged to develop kind of adventure clubs where young people could be taken out camping in Mangostar or in East Kazakhstan, and they'd because when you actually do it and you understand how kind of fun it is, how thrilling it is, then you take that passion with you into adulthood. So that would be my other suggestion. Kind of grow that generation of young people that kind of really want to explore their country.
Thank you so much. And on a similar note, back in pre-pandemic, we started an initiative called Live Lessons, but the reason we call them live because they would take place somewhere corresponding to the subject. For instance, the lesson of history would be by a mausoleum of Hoca Ahmet Yusuf in Turkestan for students from Astana. Or we take Pavlodar kids to Ulutau and teach them, let's say we could take them even to Baikonur, or you used to take kids to Astana's Nuralem, the Museum of Energy, and teach them physics there. Those great initiatives. We had about 3,500 kids traveling in Kazakhstan, even during the pandemic. During the pandemic. And my point was, you should make them see Kazakhstan now while they're kids, so they have fond memories, and when they grow up, they want to go back and kind of revisit and so on. That way, we're growing a pool of patriots.
Exactly.
And then domestic tourists at the same time, because a lot of benefits that derive from tourism actually can be attributed to patriotism and ideology. And this is something I think you need in a newly developing state, which Kazakhstan obviously is.
Yes. But I think also people, if they go to these places, then they realise just what an extraordinary natural heritage Kazakhstan has. And I've shown my photographs from some of my trips to my colleagues in the embassy, and a number of them have said, "Oh, wow, I've never been there. I didn't realise it looked like that." And so, and I know I'm guilty of it too. We're all guilty of it. I live in the UK, but there are many beautiful parts of the UK which I've never been to. I've lived a lot of the last 20 years overseas, and there are lots of parts of the UK that I've never visited. So, but sometimes you do just need reminding that there's somewhere really beautiful and interesting close to home.
Of course, I know a lot of Astana people haven't set foot in Bayturek yet. It's been here for 20 years, but yes, or Medeo for Almaty people, yes, something remains like a taboo. Great. Well, I'd like to bring my last point, I guess, unless you want to add something, but I can't wait, and I have my tickets reserved for Chelsea-Astana game taking place in Almaty.
I'm also going to be there, yes.
Amazing. Excellent. Well, you're also a football fan, I guess. Or
yes, well, I wouldn't say I normally support a particular club, but I definitely always support the England team, of course, and the Scottish team, and the Welsh team, and the Northern Ireland team, and but it's a great occasion that Chelsea's coming to Kazakhstan. So yeah, my ticket is bought, my plane ticket to Almaty is bought. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I saw some commercials going in on the web, inviting fans from the UK and come to visit Almaty for the game to support.
I'm really interested to see how many come, actually, because I think I remember when Northern Ireland last year came to play. I think it was part of the qualifiers for the European Cup,
right? And
they came to play Kazakhstan, and I went to see them in Astana. And to my amazement, we had a hardy band of people in green in a tiny corner of the stadium. I was hugely impressed. We have someone from Northern Ireland in our embassy as well, who was there very proudly, and so. Football fans are a committed bunch, and they will travel a long distance to support their team. So I'm confidently expecting quite a lot of Chelsea fans.
Well, we're also very excited, and I know a lot of people are going. And it's quite odd that Astana plays in Almaty, but due to the overhaul of the arena here locally, they have to play somewhere else. Both teams, Jeunesse, which is another local team, actually the historical team of Astana, or Tselinograd or Akmola is Jeunesse, and they keep playing in Karaganda, their home games. But Astana, another newer team is established during the independence of Kazakhstan, and they now play, they have to play in Almaty. So a lot of people from Astana or elsewhere from Kazakhstan would go there, not to cheer Astana, but to see Chelsea playing here in Kazakhstan.
Yes, well, it's a perfect example, isn't it? You can cheer both sides, because it's the fact that they're playing is wonderful in itself. And I think the final kind of, that's reminded me, the final thing I'd add is you also, of course, have the most brilliant global ambassador for Kazakh culture, and that, of course, is Dimash Gudaibergen. And I am a huge fan of Dimash, and he has, I think, at least 10 million sort of signed up dears. He has 142 fan clubs around the world. My Kazakh teacher tells me that he is doing online lessons with people from Australia and Bulgaria, and I said, and when he told me this, I said, they don't happen to be Dimash fans, do they? And indeed they are. So I think he has done the most extraordinary job in really demonstrating to people kind of the wonderful, wonderful Kazakh music, folk songs, language, as well as through his videos and music videos showing some of the landscape of Kazakhstan.
Just recently, we produced together jointly with Dimash team a new video music to one of his latest songs about Kazakhstan, featuring major destinations.
Yes.
And he personally visited 3 or 4 of them, of course, Almaty and the vicinity, Turkestan, Mangistau was there, of course.
Yes.
The rest we, of course, used footage because he couldn't travel. Again, back to the point of the territory of Kazakhstan, he could make it throughout this season or the time that he dedicated to this. But it's an amazing video, music video I'll share with you. But again, Dimash is the first ambassador of Kazakhstan's tourism that we appointed back in 2018. And we started with Dimash tour. I went to his hometown, met his mom. We had to convince his family that we have to do this. So we brought the Chinese travelers. They were the biggest fan base at that time back in 2018. So we brought the fam trip, and they toured Aktobe. They went to the college where he studied, met his teacher, went to the place, the palace where he went on stage for the first time, and so on and so on. But then pandemic happened, of course. But I guess this is something that should be on the agenda for us when we think of marketing, when we think about culture and how we should portray Kazakhstan in modern day.
Yes, no, absolutely. No, he's the best cultural ambassador you could have, actually. So I think he's doing a really fantastic job, and he's just had I think a couple of really successful concerts in in Germany and in
Istanbul,
Prague as well.
yes,
I think a number of concerts this year. So and I'm sure that a bunch of his fans travelled to Astana when he also sang and had a couple of concerts during the Nomad Games.
Exactly.
So I think
it was actually the highlight, the culmination of the World Nomad Games. So that the whole thing was closing with his concert on the 13th of September.
Yes.
Yes, and lots of people showed up, of course, from around the world. And actually his fan clubs are the most disciplined and the most frequent visitors to our international pavilions when we go elsewhere to showcase Kazakhstan at travel fairs. Yes, they come with their signs, the DES and the pictures and the souvenirs. So we all love Dimash, and we miss him here, actually.
Yes,
with his concerts.
Yes. No, I'm very much hoping. I was devastated that I had to be in London the week of the Nomad Games, and I wasn't able to go to the concert. So I really hope before my term is up, that Dimash will do another concert here, and I can go.
Yes, and the World Nomad Games, we have to repeat it.
Yes, no, and I will have to come back next time. I mean, I think is it Kyrgyzstan who's
it's
hosting
going to
the next
Kyrgyzstan
one?
again, going back home.
Yes.
We should say, and then probably I don't know, Uzbekistan or Azerbaijan, someone else will bid, but we would love to see it back. Yes, especially with 80 plus countries coming up and competing.
We even had a British team.
Yes. Okay, well, next time we organize it for you. Thank you so much, Kathy, for joining our travel Boldcast, and we were happy to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing all the insights, for bringing the travel guides. I really didn't know it was actually written by your predecessor. So we really hope, and we're always open and we're welcoming British tourists here in Kazakhstan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.